This is the Inle Lake on the way to our hotel. The hotel was in the middle of the lake. We flew from Yangon, the capital of Myanmar, to Heho Airport, and it took us 1 hour. From Heho Airport to the boat station going to Inle Lake was another 45 minutes by car. Inle Lake is famous for its floating villages and gardens and the unique way of life of the local Intha people, with their living communities based entirely on the water. This was our accommodation in stilt in the middle of the lake, and it was really beautiful. The boats that were passing by, the birds flying everywhere, and it's really fantastic place. After we had a rest, we went for sunset cruising in the lake, and we went to watch the local people called the Intha do their traditional fishing, which is very interesting. If you will notice, Intha fishermen catch fish by standing on one leg on the extreme end of the boat, at the same time wrapping the other leg around the oar. This technique of fishing is a tradition that's believed to date back to the 12th century and has been handed down through the generations. Leg-rowing fishermen start learning as teenagers, and some keep going well into their 70s and beyond. On our second day, we went to see the floating gardens and their houses on stilt. We are accustomed to gardening on dry land. Here in Inle Lake is a bit of an eye-opener, for here the fruits float and the vegetables ride the ripples of a vast, idyllic lake. Our tour guide explained to us how these fertile islands are formed. Firstly, naturally occurring clumps of water hyacinth and other lake debris are captured by the farmer and secured in position using bamboo poles. These are driven into the deep mud at the bottom of the lake in areas of water between 1 and 5 meters deep. The newly created island is allowed to knit together, and grass is encouraged to grow on the surface. The grass is then cut, dried, and finally burned to create a nutritious dressing of ash. More seagrass is heaped on top, with a final layer of fine mud from the bottom of the lake. Eventually, the muds become 1 meter thick, with about a third of that above water level. The people have developed their own fascinating culture and lifestyle that revolves around the water. The Intha live on the lake and stilt houses while growing food in floating gardens. Living on a lake has its benefits, such as easy access to water and resilience to floods. Following day, we went to visit the lake's incredible Lotus rivers. The name of the village is Paw Khon village. It is a floating community located on Inle Lake in central Myanmar. This is a lotus plantation. The lotus farmer was harvesting the matured lotus stems. Lotus stems are first cut into manageable sections before being scored, twisted, and pulled to reveal a web of thin filaments. barely visible to the naked eye. The filament is laid out on a wooden workbench and kept moist with occasional splashes of water. As the process is repeated with new stems, the artisan rolls the moistened fibers together to create a thicker, stronger thread. With a quick roll of the palm, a new length is soldered onto the last to form one continuous thread. Because of the time-consuming nature of the thread-making process, pure lotus cloth is rare and expensive. The following day, we went to see the Sway Indian Pagoda by boat. We could have traveled by land, but there were two factors that we had to consider. It's far and the road wasn't good. We preferred by boat because obviously the scenery was really beautiful. From Inle Lake to Sway Indian Pagoda, it's 8 kilometers long of twisting canal. Inle Lake sits in a valley between two mountain ranges, feels like a different world to the rest of Myanmar. These structures date from the 14th to the 18th centuries and are typical Burmese zedi. Like others found across the region, the stupas featured fantastical creatures like thick lion-like beings that protect sacred spaces. These were sites for contemplation and meditation, and many contained relics inside their bases. I was pumping the bellows to produce the air through the charcoals to make it burn the charcoals to heat up the metal. We pound the metal continuously and they only stop when the metal is no longer red in color or not too hot any longer. We make everything such as farming tools, knives, souvenirs, and also boat propellers. And take note, they do all by hand. This was our last day in Inle Lake. We stayed for 7 days and it was really a very relaxing holiday because we didn't rush. There were times that we just sat down in the balcony watching the fishermen, people passing by and the birds flying everywhere. Thank you for watching and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. And the transfer from Old Bagan Airport to the hotel was just approximately 30 minutes. And this is by land, by the way. We arrived there before lunch, so we had time to rest. And the feeling was fantastic. Could you imagine you are in front of an ancient Buddha and pagoda in front of your face? And then we went to watch the sunset in the evening. We didn't book any sunset tour because the old Bagan is an open museum and the pagodas are everywhere. The following day, we woke up very early, around 5 in the morning, to do the balloon ride. Bagan is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Mandalay region of Myanmar. From the 9th to 13th centuries, the city was the capital of the Bagan Kingdom or Bagan Kingdom, the first kingdom that unified the regions that would later constitute Myanmar. This is what I meant when I said open museum, because the pagodas are everywhere, even in front and at the back of our hotel. During the kingdom's height between the 11th and 13th centuries, more than 10,000 Buddhist temples, pagodas, and monasteries were constructed in the Bagan Plains alone, of which remains over 2,500 temples and pagodas survive. Another way to appreciate the old Bagan is to ride a hot air balloon. We saw lots of pagodas and temples, and I could imagine long time ago during the 10th and 13th centuries how vast the pagodas were. And to date, some temples have been vandalized and destroyed, with only about 2,300 temples spread over 104 square kilometers remaining in the Bagan archaeological zone. This ancient city was once home to over 13,000 temples constructed between the 9th and 13th centuries.